All right. Hello, everybody. It's Lydia. I am back with another episode for you and my first new YouTube. And today I have a very special guest that I'm actually so excited about, and I think you will be too. His name is Jim Gale. He is the founder of Food Forest Abundance. He's also a proud father of 4 daughters, opposite of me, 4 sons.
Wow.
And I heard about Jim through the Health Freedom for Humanity organization's podcast. And somehow he came back after that first introduction into my field, if you will. And as soon as I watched the second video, had my second experience with him, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have him on the podcast. He's amazing. And so here he is with me today. Thank you, Jim, so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Lydia. I'm so excited to share this message with you and with anybody listening. And it's going global. It's going so fast. This idea of freedom starts in our hearts and minds, right? And that's where we have to focus our energy at first, because we cannot live if we're in fear. And that is the number one control mechanism of the globalists, of these psychopaths that are controlling and destroying our planet. So then if that's the problem, what's the solution? Faith and courage and joy and love and freedom. So Thank you for having me on.
Yes. Well, you emanate all the things that I try to encourage as well. So, and I have a deep passion for food, obviously, real food and nature. I know you have a history of growing up, spending lots of time in the woods, same here. And my parents both came from parents who gardened. So it's kind of like in my blood, if you will. And one of the things that I really am kind of floored by, because I have that background, and I know you have somewhat of a background too, is that we are so disconnected from our food and where it comes from. And we're all mostly consumers, right? Spent a lot of time walking around a neighborhood these last few months and noticing like no one's outside.
Right.
No one has a garden. Maybe they have flowers, right? And they have landscape lawns, but there's nobody that has food.
I know. Yeah.
And society certainly doesn't make it easy, but there's definitely a lot we can talk about today, how to make that easier if people are even remotely feeling that internal, like, oh, I would love to have my own garden, or I would love to go outside and pick fresh tomatoes. So I want to talk more about what you're doing with the Food Forest Abundance and let people know what it is, why you decided to do it.
Oh, I sure will. So Victor Hugo said a long time ago, there's one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world. And that is an idea whose time has come, right? And so that begs the question, well, what the hell is the idea, right? Or what the heaven is the idea? The idea is literally, and now I don't want anybody to run when I say this, because I'm saying this from a very scientific and logical perspective. But the vision that everybody has in their mind when they imagine the Garden of Eden, a place of abundance, a place of food everywhere, a place of joy and bunny rabbits and birds and butterflies and life, a place of beauty, that is the way that it should be. Now, there's one reason that it's not that way. And that reason is called governmente, right? Govern means to control, and mente means mind. That's not an accident that the name of the entity that we allow to control our lives is called mind control, right? When people get that most basic, obvious fact that it's governmente is mind control, then we say, okay, well, if that's the case, then do I trust what they're telling me? Do I trust their food pyramid? Do I trust all of the things that the mind control people are trying to put in our minds? And then I say, hell no, absolutely not, right? So then if that's the problem, what's the opposite of mind control?
Right.
Enlightenment, right? But then you've got another pillar of governmente that says, nope, only one person can be enlightened. The rest of you can't, right? What? That's another fear tactic and manipulation of bastardization of the truth of everything, is that we are spirit, we are divine, we are part of this epic situation, and we are here for a reason. We are here. You and I and everybody listening have the opportunity, which is the most epic opportunity in the history of humanity, right? And that is to change our world into the Garden of Eden, into a food forests everywhere, which will lead directly to a place of freedom and abundance like we have never seen for thousands of years.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting that we have forgotten that for the majority of the time we've been alive on the planet, like as a human race, that we've grown our own food, or we've sourced our own food, or we foraged for our own food. Now that we're more domesticated or civilized, which I think is hilarious, but we've completely lost sight of that. And so we've just, the longer we continue this, the further away from it all we're going to get. And now we hear like rumor of, them trying to control the food more and more and more, and we won't go there. But if you guys are down those rabbit holes, you know what I'm talking about. And it's just such a great time now. And now is all we have anyway, right? I mean, so this isn't like a pressure thing. This is like literally today, right now, this is it, right? This is it. So embrace the now.
Yeah.
And, realize, hey, food is important. It's one thing we all can come together on and have in common and necessary for our human bodies. And it should really be the best quality nature can provide. So to me, food comes from nature, not from a factory. And you guys know that, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I heard you say in a couple videos I watched was about our topsoil. And I talk about this, about how our soil has been minerally depleted for probably over 100 years. And so, because I focus on the mineral side of things for people's health. And then you had said something about how our topsoil is depleting so much that in the next 60 years, we're not going to have any if we don't do something now. And some people may think, 60 years. All right.
Yeah, that's only my grandkids' lives.
Right. It's
like
not.
That's all that is, right? I mean,
right.
What? That's huge. Like that's one of our primary things. Like that brings tears to my eyes. I've got 4 daughters, and this idea, this vision I have of sitting around the campfire when I'm 100 years old and having my kids and my grandkids and maybe my great grandkids and all telling the stories, back in the 2020s during the Great War. We overcame ignorance and wickedness and psychopaths, and here's how we did it, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to be such an epic story to tell.
Yeah, for sure. I love that you said that because, I've been having conversations with a lot of the youth, the teens, because I have teens and my oldest just turned 23 yesterday. And they're just disgruntled about the world, and they're like, I'm just not going to have kids, like they have this just frustration of like, they don't know how to fix it. Yeah. And so they're just like, And so there's almost like this loss of joy for creating a future, and it's kind of sad to me. So
it's all by design, and our job, my joyful obsession is to help raise people out of that energy. It's an energetic thing. It's a vibrational thing. As Tesla said, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And then when David Hawkins in Power versus Force very well detailed how energy and emotions and vibrations, it's all tied together. An emotional state is representative of the vibration of your spirit, of your soul, of your being. Even in scientific terms, this is measurable. Right now, It's amazing. Thank you, Dr. Joe Dispenza, for putting this out. I don't know if you've seen his work, but he has made a system of what would otherwise be called miraculous healings. And it's all about going deep, meditating, and getting connected with a higher something. And I'm not claiming nobody, something is way too big for any human mind to comprehend, but something is there because you can feel it if you meditate and you just silence your mind and just feel the energy of the universe. And then with that energy, you can direct and manifest whatever your mind can conceive and believe.
Yeah. So let's talk about that because you are doing that. I noticed you started this organization in 2020, but it wasn't like just a snap of the fingers. It's definitely something that was brewing, right, for many, many years of your life, of your experience. But 2020 was hey, we got to do something now, right?
Yes. Oh gosh. So it started when I was 29 years old. So I'm 52 now. When I was 29 years old, I wrote my goals, and I had been studying. I was living in Surfers Paradise, Australia with a backpack. I was just traveling the world, didn't have any money. I was just working. Like I worked at a bar in Surfers Paradise for a while, and it just had a good time. And I was studying at the time because I was in between things. I previously was a bar manager in Maui, on Maui for 4 years, and a bar owner. And then I lost my life savings there, which wasn't much. It was like $10, but had enough to travel the world. And then I started learning about the possibilities of what humans can achieve when they get the clutter out of their minds and start focusing with desire and intention and love and joy and energy, inspired action towards any particular goal. So my goal was to get back to the United States and to change the world by introducing the things that I had learned from Dennis Waitley and Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins and all these amazing communicators, Napoleon Hill and so on. And I got back and I started working with the school systems and giving speeches at schools, and they didn't want to hear my message, partly because I wasn't as developed as a speaker, and partly because they actually got offended. They actually got offended when I'm like, hey, we could do this better. I'm not saying you're failing. I'm saying we can do it better. Well, they took it as you're saying I'm failing as a teacher. I'm like, what are you doing here? It was such a weird ego thing. So at the same time, I was dead broke and I needed to start making money. So I had goals to have $3 million in 3 years. Right? And I had bartending experience and a teaching degree. So when I told my friends that, they laughed at me and said I was fucking crazy and all that stuff. And anyway, 3.5 years later, through a series of magical events, serendipitous, synchronistic events, my company did about $1.3 billion in sales. And I sold it, bought a boat, and lived on the ocean for a year. And then I went right back to this idea of teaching. And then I learned more about what I was teaching. Emotional intelligence is where I wanted to go. So I went back, I started talking to the schools, and I had the same experience. The schools were offended and just they didn't desire to do any changing. And at the time, I still didn't know what governmente meant. I still didn't know that there was a structure that doesn't want us to learn. I just thought it was just based on ignorance. Well, it's not. It's a design thing that creates enslavement. So then I moved to Costa Rica, and I had made about 20 million bucks, and I lost everything. Now, and this is the best thing that ever happened to me. And I didn't just lose it. I invested in my education in a way that I wish I could have found a different way and done it more wisely. But I didn't know anything about money. I didn't know anything about, diversification. I found something that I loved. I put all my eggs in that basket. And my one goal was to create a community that becomes a model for the world to follow, right? But what I didn't know is I didn't understand people at that time. I didn't understand that when I would invite people from all these walks of life, very polarized Democrats and Republicans, and very polarized religious folks and atheists, and all these people up into this little community in the middle of the jungle. And when the election time came around in 2012, the government was extorting us for money, and we beat them in court on every round. They owe us $28 million. And then the people started fighting because of what they were watching on TV. So half of them were watching CNN, the other half were watching Fox. And all of a sudden, our community center became a freaking boxing ring. It was mind-boggling. So with that new knowledge, I spent everything I had to get to this place where, and constantly asking the new questions. What is the solution? What is the solution? And that's when I read Bill Mollison's quote, though the problems of our world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple.
Right.
I started to bawl. I literally started sobbing because I had my first two daughters at the time. My wife, it was just, I needed to hear that. And from that day forward, that was about 13, 14 years ago, I've been focused on this one thing. And 7 months ago, it launched, and now it's global and it's changing the world.
I love it. Yeah. Oof. Yeah. Simple, right?
Yeah,
Simple.
simple.
Like,
Keep it simple.
keep it simple. That's my big thing too, actually. Like, I like to hurry up and get to the simple. I like to like take shortcuts and find like the simplest way to do anything possible, right? And when you suggest, oh, hey, instead of like taking all these antacids and all these prescription things and all this and that, like maybe try remineralizing your water, maybe try eating more salt, maybe what? Can't be that simple. And, we tend to have this idea that everything has to be hard, or maybe we like feel like it has to be hard because if it's not, then we would feel stupid or something for the fact that it really wasn't that hard in the first place.
Yes, yes. So one of the things related to what you're saying, you're so right. One of the things that I've noticed in the permaculture movement, so permaculture stands for permanent culture. It used to be permanent agriculture, but then it kind of evolved because it is a very thoughtful design system that literally I use it for business. Like it's the best business modeling system I've ever seen. And so, but a lot of the smart people, right? The people that really dig in, they use their smarts as kind of a way to prop themselves up to be kind of attractive to others, right? Okay, come hire me because I'm so smart. I know the scientific names of all these plants. Now, don't get me wrong. I so admire and respect those people that do put the time in to know the details. What doesn't work for our society is when that smartness becomes kind of a barrier to entry, right? Here's the deal, folks. If you go to Lowe's right now and you buy 5 different fruit trees and you cut some holes in your grass and you put them in the ground, you're probably going to produce a yield. You're probably going to have fruit, right? But what we do is we design it so you're going to radically increase your yield and radically decrease your failure rate. And then we're going to stack it. And this is where it gets mind-blowing. When you have 7 layers of food in one particular guild, right? When you have roots and tubers under the ground and mushrooms and medicinals on the ground cover, and then you've got shorter bushes and taller bushes and shorter fruit trees and taller fruit trees all in one space. That's the Garden of Eden. That's food forests everywhere. And that's what creates, well, that's what'll change our world more than any one thing that I can imagine.
Yeah, it's like working smarter instead of harder.
Yes. And nature takes care of it. Some people say, well, I don't have the time or to manage something like that. Okay, well, how much time do you manage the forest at the end of your street or in your backyard? That's a silly question. I don't manage that. The nature does it. Well, there you go. When you design properly and install properly, then literally you can walk away from a food forest for 30 years and come back and you've just got a radically monstrous food forest that you can't even walk through. Now, the main thing, and a lot of people don't want that. They don't want a jungle. So then we design it according to landscaping codes in different areas and guidelines. So it looks absolutely beautiful. You mentioned ornamentals earlier. If we simply turned our ornamentals into more productive plants that also produced food and medicine and habitat, then that's, if it's the only thing we did in our HOA communities, the amount of life and abundance, we would reverse mass extinction and deforestation and cancer and heart disease and diabetes and world hunger, all with just using the same resources in a more thoughtful way.
I love it. Yeah. And it's just as, if not more, beautiful.
Yes. Well, yeah, you're adding butterflies and bees and birds, and you're adding life, like massive amounts of life. You take a square meter of grass or a square cubic yard or yard of grass, right? Okay, how much life is there, right? You've got a monocrop that has one color, monochromatic, it's all one thing, right? And yes, there's some bugs in the soil, but when you stack it, now you've got literally hundreds of times more life in the same particular area.
I know, I love it. Yeah, so let's talk about this whole food forest abundance. So I think there's a lot of people who can hear this and be like, you know what, it makes sense. It would be smart to grow some of my own food just in case. I think this last year and a half, almost going on 2, people have started to kind of be like, oh, there could be a shit hits the fan kind of scenario coming our way with all of what we have seen. We know some things now. We've seen some problems in the supply chain. Not everyone's in tune to this, but I think most people are feeling some pinch right around that. Excuse me. And but they're just in overwhelm. Like the majority of humans are in what I would say burnout, because that's who I work with. I work with burned out people, and most people are, right? So they hear that and they hear overwhelm. They get the concepts logically. Okay, growing my own food makes sense. I have zero experience. I don't even know how to start, even though he just said it's easy. Excuse me, sorry. And so let's dig into the whole process, because not everyone has watched your videos. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So it starts with design. Permaculture is a design process where we look at the agricultural zone, number one. And like, I'm in Florida. Some people say, oh, well, then I can't do it because I'm in Minnesota. Well, I'm from Minnesota. My mom grew up on and they didn't have food or plumbing or electric till she was 15 years old. Right? Can you imagine going outside in Minnesota night? And oh man, but they grew all the food they needed right there. Now they did it without knowing permaculture principles. They used mostly annuals, and my mom would tell me stories all the time about the gooseberries that she would go get, and she'd spend hours just eating gooseberries, and that's permaculture, right? Now imagine if we didn't just have gooseberries, but if we had 30, 40, 50, maybe even, like my buddy Chad in northern Minnesota has 300 different species of edible medicinal plants. He's got birds here in Minnesota that they've only ever seen in Russia. He's got, life is exploding. His food forest, it's expansive. He can never touch it again because it was designed and installed properly, and it's expanding by its own very nature. It's regenerative and expansive. The animals are coming into the system, eating the plants, going out and pooping out here, and now planting a new plant. And if you just let that system go over time, it would cover the whole planet, right? The amount of destruction and tyranny and poisons that have been led to where we are now is just radical. But the good news is that now that these ideas are proven all over the world, people are doing it. So if you have a yard, start with the design. Right? That design will tell you exactly what the layers of soil and mulch and compost are. It'll tell you exactly what plants go where. And then if you want, we have a 45-page document where you can DIY your own food forest, or you can have one of our installers, our cooperative people, which is, it's our business model, is the co-ops around the world. We're now in 15 countries and 40 states, just in 7 months.
That's amazing.
It's so exciting.
So just to backtrack, because I'm not sure everyone's going to know. So basically what food forest abundance is all, you can work globally, but right now you're mostly in the US, because you said 15 states, right?
40 states, 15 countries.
Oh, 15 countries, 40 states. My bad. Okay. That's awesome. Wow. That's even better. So basically what you guys do is someone says, okay, I want to work with food forest abundance. I live in an urban area. Like right now I'm looking out the yard. It's like a fifth of an acre, maybe not even.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I've got. I live in PA. You're saying you guys know what the soil does. You guys know where the sun angles are hitting. You figure all that out, and then tell us, and then probably I think what I saw somewhere is you would interview the families or the person working with you on,
Yep.
what do you eat? What would you like to eat? What does your family utilize now? And I think you had said in the interview with Del Bigtree, like start with a kitchen garden, start with just this like first layer, so to speak, right?
Yeah, we call it zone one.
Okay.
And zone one is the closest. It's the things that you're going to get like, oh, I need a tomato, or oh, I need a lemon for my drink, or oh, whatever. That's right out the back door, right? The closest you can get. Permaculture is kind of an energy science. It's sustainable energy systems, and systems that produce more energy than they take to create and maintain is the definition of sustainable. So we look at what is the best use of human caloric energy. And that's always closest is best. Yeah.
Okay. And then you work with the local, like what can be grown locally. So that's another thing I've talked about a lot. I talk to my clients about, of course, not everyone's ready to start there, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're growing in season, what's locally able to be grown in the zone we live in. And so you said lemons. I'm like, well, I don't know if I can grow lemons here, but
right. Yeah, you probably can.
So it is kind of a you do want to like focus on what your region grows and learn to,
Yes.
work with that, right?
That's the number one thing. The agricultural zone is the first consideration with regard to any food forest. Now, there are people that are blowing those zones out of the water by creating microclimates and so on. But for the suburban backyard, we start with what grows already in your area. What can you get at the local nurseries? And then from there, we go to what do you want? What do you desire? What do you envision for the highest and best use of your primary asset, which is your land, your property? Mm-hmm. Right? And people all over are producing all of the food their families need on a quarter acre. Now, mm-hmm. when they're talking all, then they're working at it. It becomes more of a part-time thing where they're working maybe even an hour or two a day. Where the food forest that I'm talking about, you could never work, and then it would just keep right. growing. Or you could spend an hour a month and just making sure the trails are open and making sure that the trees are pruned and stuff like that.
Right. Like that's probably the majority of people's thought is like, I don't want to invest too much time.
Right.
But then I have a feeling as people start this, they actually enjoy the time they do spend, because I think I heard you say something in one of your videos about how, and anyone who's garden knows this, is, spending time in your garden, picking and getting your hands in it. First of all, we need to get our hands in the dirt, everyone. Our microbiomes are suffering for sure. And what's that saying? Like you need to eat a peck of dirt in your life or something like that?
Yeah, magnesium, all these nutrients come from the dirt, and the dirt, this whole thing about dirt being dirty is a big freaking scam. I mean, you look at a doctor's office shelf and you're going to be more likely to get sick there with the poisons than you are with your hand. Your hands in the dirt is what will heal you.
Yep.
So what a scam, right? Isn't that amazing? Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's one big thing we've all lost. So, it's an opportunity to like inch your way back into nature's way. Right. And so for me, I spent a lot of time helping my dad garden, and we did a garden on one of those like community plots. And I literally couldn't wait to get to the garden in the morning and let the sun rise and listen to the birds. And like, I would lose myself picking beans. Like I was like, oh my gosh, I needed this so much. And it's very therapeutic.
Yeah.
So gardeners are probably some of the most Zen people you'll ever meet.
Yes.
Right.
Is that true? It's like the ultimate stack of benefits. Having a food forest in your yard will radically decrease your family's chances of being diseased and diseased. Right. And I'm talking all the big ones: cancer, diabetes, heart disease. Eating a healthy, poison-free meal a day that is vine ripe and right from your backyard this is how we change our lives. And there's many studies, peer-reviewed studies, showing gardening similar to meditation and yoga when it comes to the benefits to your health and your psychology. Now, when you're gardening and you're listening to something beautiful that inspires you, and you're breathing and you're noticing the beauty in life, it's like treasure hunting. It's like, oh, look at this one. Oh my gosh.
I know.
That's the way it's supposed to be everywhere. So yes, as far as even just an ROI thing, just on a cash basis, you're looking at hundreds of % ROI over the first 4 or 5 years. And then after that, you're looking at about 100% a year based on the cost if you have somebody else install it. Now, if you go do it yourself, then the ROI is literally infinite.
Yeah. Let's talk more about that. So one of the things people say to me is, Lydia, do I really have to take supplements, or can I get my nutrition through my food? And my first question is, number one, does all the food you eat come from healthy, remineralized soil? If not, then yes, unfortunately, you do need supplementation. I wish that wasn't true. Believe me, I'm not here to make $1 million on supplements. Like, we've seen the supplement world blow up. And then of course, everyone's confused about what to take because there's so many, and that's a whole big can of worms, right?
Yeah,
so if you really don't want to have to enter that world and stay in that world and buy plastic bottles of pills, like my goal is to not need as many supplements, as like to reduce, and only take the bare minimum. And I'm working towards that, and I've been working towards that for a while, but, so that's one thing, right? The other thing is your water. So is your water mineral rich and free of chemicals and toxins? And if you can't answer yes 100% to both of those things, then, unfortunately, you're going to need supplemental support if you want to work on your health now, unless you go and find a farmer who's done all this for you, and you can buy from them only. And, and it's just difficult. Right. But so there's the ROI in terms of like, you save time on travel to go and pick up things.
Yeah.
It's totally fresh. So one of the things that I've kind of had a beef about is like, why are we eating tomatoes in January here?
Right.
Like, why? You pick a tomato off the vine in the sun, and it's got more vitamin C than these crappy tomatoes that were like driven from thousands of miles, and they put chemicals on them, and then they suffocate them in plastic. And then you eat them perfectly content that they're mealy and pink and disgusting. Like, why are we doing this? But that's my little rant. But like, the point is that's not a nutrient dense food, even though it's a real food.
Right.
That's from nature. Apparently it's just not real anymore. Right.
Yeah.
So we're getting things literally picked fresh that the sun has kissed, and it's totally ripe, and all its nutrients are intact and the most abundant that they can be. So that's huge. So you're getting more nutrition, so you don't need as much supplementation. And then you started
taste.
Tastes way better. Like, why would you? It's like, I'm like, I don't understand the restaurants that buy tomatoes from California here. And I'm like, why? Just take it off the menu.
Exactly.
But anyway, so you are eating more local with what nature provides within the seasons. And the reason for that is that you're going to get the most nutrition from it. It just makes the most sense. But then you started to talk more about the ROI in terms of like the longer term picture and the yields that you're going to produce. And that makes a ton of sense. So if people look at it as an investment, right? Like,
it is definitely an investment. It is the most valuable investment that I can imagine. When all things considered, your health, your wellness, the joy, butterflies, birds, if you like nature, if you like life, and you're all of a sudden making a major difference in the food supply chain for yourself. So food scarcity is a real deal, right? Mm-hmm. Short term, a lot of people are saying that we have a major short-term catastrophe on our hands. What I know for certain is that we have a long-term catastrophe. Yes. We can't do this. We have to make the changes. And the changes are for selfish reasons. This is one thing that I like to convey to people. I'm not asking anybody to go out and do something for somebody on the other side of the world or for somebody. Go do this for yourself, right? And like my partner, Dr. Ian Scott, he about 3 years ago, he converted his yard. And you know, the first year you've got these little skinny twig trees that are like 3, 4, 5, 6 feet tall. The next year they're like 3 or 4 times that big, still kind of skinny. By year 3, you can't even see across his yard now. He's got 63 different species of food growing in his yard, and he's got 1/10 of an acre. And it's just fantastic amount of abundance everywhere, right? His kids go running on the back and they can just get handfuls of food anytime they want. And it's the best snacks they could ever have. Now, when a kid, my daughter, we have the raspberries in the back, it's twice a day. Let's go pick berries, right? And it's just the most beautiful thing in the world. We're picking berries. I'm so happy that she's eating that instead of the poisons that are all over the shelves, right? You know, you look at the layers of and Henry Kissinger said it a long time ago. He said, if you want to control nations, control oil. If you want to control people, control their food supply. This isn't the ramblings of a crazy man. This is the strategy of a psychopath that is in charge of implementing the strategy. The strategy is what you find on the grocery store shelves today. The solution is just what I'm talking about. It's so ridiculously easy.
Yes, I love that. And I love that you brought up how joy-filled the kids get. Because like, I feel like a lot of people did not grow up with gardening, so they don't know what they're missing.
Right.
So we, in our last home, we had wild berries growing in our backyard, and I grew a bunch of things in pots. I had like a little container urban garden. Awesome. And they did, like, I didn't even have to tell them, hey, go eat this healthy food, you know, like being like motherly, like they just wanted to, they were inclined to. And we joined CSAs over the year, and I drug them there, you know, oh, I don't want to go, you know. But their best memories that they always bring up is, Mom, can we go back and pick berries at that farm? Can we go back and pick apples at that farm? Can we? That was so cool, you know. And so it is huge for your kids, you know, even if you don't have the actual experience of that, you know, do it for your kids. And you can become a kid again too in this process. But I want to talk more about, oh, you had said something that I wanted to. So the long-term, planting the trees, and then 3 years later, it's like this abundance. So, what was it like getting started? Like, I want to talk more, like paint more stories, because I feel like people love stories.
Yeah.
To overcome whatever objections that are going on.
Okay, I've got two.
Right now.
Yeah, I've got two. So the two that I like to share are, one is the food forest that we planted. We're building an off-grid community here in Central Florida with 10 home sites on 52 acres on a private lake with a runway on the east coast. It's really a neat situation. My partner's a pilot. Runway? Yeah. So you can land, you can park your plane in your garage, right? Type of thing. It's a unique situation. We're building a studio, and it's a completely off grid. Every lot has its own food, water, and energy systems with designed food forests throughout the whole property, right? Thousands of fruit trees and edibles all over is going to be the reality here. We've already planted hundreds. And so anyway, the first starter one, it was 700 square feet on the ground. It was a circle. My buddy called me up. He said it was last March, and there was shit hitting the fan. And he's like, Jim, I went and bought a bunch of like $3,500 worth of the fruit trees. And literally that day he said, call me and let's put them in the ground. I'm like, oh, that's not how we do it, but let's do it. So we we went to the dumpster. We got a bunch of cardboard out of the dumpster, right? And it was a cattle pasture. We put the cardboard on the cattle pasture. We hired a guy from a local nursery to come in and dump this mushroom compost soil, good soil, right? And then there's a big bale of hay from the cattle pasture in the field. So we rolled that over there. We actually pushed it with his truck, and then we put the fruit trees in the ground and the berry bushes, all the different turmeric and ginger and all the different stuff. And there's about 55 plants or so, right? And then we put the hay on top. You want to cover the ground. And this is the number one kind of thing people miss, is they don't put mulch or wood chips on top of the soil. That that area between the soil and the wood chips is where the life happens. I mean, a huge percentage of the growth, the microbiome is created right there. So you don't want to see your soil. You want to cover it. That one thing, by the way, is going to change your production massively. Right? So we put the fruit trees in the ground, all this stuff. We put the hay on top of the soil. And then for the first couple of months, it was very dry. So we went there, we probably spent an hour every 2 weeks or so. It rained a couple of times, but an hour every 2 weeks. And we made sure the root balls were watered. For the last 14 months, we have done nothing. And the thing is just exploding with life. Like everything has doubled, tripled, quadrupled. Some have 10x in mass. We've got Barbados cherries and we've got olives and we've got, I mean, just the ground cover is longevity spinach and sweet potatoes and all, which by the way, you can eat the leaves and the stems of those. They're fantastic. And all these different types of plants on 700 square feet, zero maintenance in a year.
That's
and then,
amazing.
yeah. And then back to Dr. Ian Scott, his backyard is a designed landscape. It looks and feels like a suburban home landscape, except for much more dense, but there's trails through it and it's just beautiful. In fact, we just had a wheelchair bound fellow come over named Hector, and we talked about how to design ADA into all of these different systems, which is really a cool thing coming. So his food forest, he spends about a half an hour, 4 or 5 days a week. And I said, are you working? He goes, I've never worked a day in my life here. And I see him, he goes into his food forest and 80% of his half an hour is just kind of fidgeting because he wants to be there. Yes. It's such a beautiful thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. What is longevity spinach?
So
I'm the vining stuff.
Yeah, it does vine. I'm a huge fan of perennials, everything perennial. Perennials, by the way, and annuals. Annuals are plants that you plant and then you harvest, and maybe it's a tomato, a cucumber, squash, anything. And then after a certain amount of time, it's done. And then you take the seeds and you replant, right? And from that one vine, you could literally get tens of thousands of seeds, hundreds of thousands of seeds, which is just magical. A perennial, on the other hand, is something you can plant once and it can produce food for generations. In fact, there's an olive tree on the Greek Isle of Crete that's been producing olives for over 2,000 years, right? So that's a perennial. So longevity spinach and Okinawa spinach and Suriname spinach and so all these other perennial spinaches are things that come back in the cold climate year after year. In a climate like here, they're just always producing. And they're infinitely better than lettuces and spinaches you buy at the store. So you could literally walk out with a bowl and you could pick your salad and have it be 100 times more nutritious.
Mm-hmm. And with that vining spinach, once you pick it, it sprouts off anew and it keeps growing more.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could cut it and you could stick it in the ground or stick it in a pot and give it away, and somebody else will have their own longevity spinach.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so, that is, like, logically speaking, a huge return on investment, right?
Ridiculous. And that's worth, like, you could sell that for $5 or $2 or whatever, yeah. But it just costs you 30 seconds a time. But the boom.
Yeah, I love that. And I think a lot of people think with gardening, you have to replant every year, which you certainly can plant annuals, and that's cool, right? But like, I love what you're doing with focusing on the perennials, because that's just way easier. That's like the shortcuts I love.
Yep. It's food for us everywhere.
Yeah, I love that. So I wanted to actually talk a little bit about another objection people probably have. And I remember back in the day when my dad and I were doing all this gardening, he had found a guy, and my dad's from New England, so he's very focused on learning from people in that area because that's his background. And he found a guy who has a business of helping people test their soil so that they can properly remineralize it. So you send in different samples from all over, and he's like, okay, you need this mixture. It's kind of what I do with the mineral balance, the hair tissue mineral balance. Like, I'm like, I see where people's gaps are, and then, help them figure out, like, well, what do I need for me right now to, like, remineralize my body? So I loved that concept back then. And one of the things that he showed with this remineralized soil was that like there was this one farmer who had remineralized their soil, and there was another like farm nearby that was using chemicals and pesticides and whatever, and they were always trying to fight the bugs and the critters. These bugs and critters would hop would like go hop on his farm or whatever, but then they would leave. They were like, we don't want to stay here.
Right.
And he actually had video demonstrations of that, and then some more stuff like that. But I was like, okay, hello.
Yeah.
And the same is true in the human body, is when you're fully remineralized, is like your body won't be able to take on disease. Like when the cells are remineralized, the virus can't stick.
Right.
So I think that a lot of people might think, oh gosh, well, what about bugs and critters and this and that? Is something going to eat my all my efforts in this garden, you know? And I think people don't realize that when you do it right, you avoid all of that for the most part.
Completely. I was just talking to a guy yesterday who was telling me about his plans to create his orchards. And he's like, okay, this is where my orange trees are going to go. And this is where my plum trees are going to go. And this, I'm like, no. Monocultures are what create these plagues of insects, right? Because an insect family can go into one spot and they just got everything. They got like enough food to breed and to multiply rapidly into the thousands, millions, and billions, right? But when you have everything diversified, when you have little guilds where you have different types of fruit trees, and you have, instead of 3 or 4 and 100 of each, you have 100 and 3 or 4 of each. Now your system is going to be resilient and strong. The diversity becomes the strength of the system. And so this idea of adding poisons that kill the microbiome, then they weaken the plant. And so then you need more of those to come in. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling, for-profit, patented, wickedly destructive cycle, right? So you use nature to solve the problem. Like wasps and spiders are phenomenal. Plants that are getting eaten will sometimes leave off a pheromone that the wasp can fly over and see the different vibrational color that is, the frequency, and they'll be like, oh, there's lunch. The wasp will fly down and then eat the caterpillar or the beetle that's eating your plant, right? And same with the micro, the rhizome, the mushrooms, the underground intelligence, where a plant over here is getting eaten by some animal, and then it'll communicate to the plants that are sometimes miles away, and those plants will then all of a sudden put stuff into their cellular makeup that's more bitter or more toxic, right? And they've studied this. They've got trees where they've got a tree here and another tree here and a tree here, and this tree is an offspring of this tree, right? This tree will feed this tree more food than it feeds this tree that's not the offspring of this tree. Like, so what? Cool. Like, the intelligence is really mind-blowing, and we've gotten so far away from that, and now it's time we come back.
It's smarter than us.
Yeah, we are part of it. Yes.
You can't mess with nature. It's smarter than us, and we won't always understand it, right? But we can trust it. I mean, it's proven to be trustful, right?
Yeah, it's the most efficient system there is. And this idea that we can't comprehend something that's so much bigger, we're part of it. So it's impossible to comprehend something that we're a little piece of it here, and it's infinite, right? We can comprehend as much as we can comprehend. And this is where Tesla's quote about vibration, frequency, and energy is so profound, because when we start connecting in, then the messages and the awarenesses, they just blossom.
Yeah. So it's like you were saying, the whole monocropping, I think hopefully people are familiar with this. Basically, that's what's going on for the most part of our food, which has caused all the problems, because we ended up having like industry, right, after the war and such, to produce more in volume, and that's part of what caused us all to lose our roots of growing our own food. We became consumers instead of producers. And the same is true in how it ended up in our bodies, because we're consuming these foods that are being eaten alive by insects and constantly being added more and more and more. It's like once you get on that hamster wheel of not nature and, you know, man-made whatever, you become a slave to it in a way. So like you start on one medication to suppress a symptom, you know, which is what they're doing with the crops, right?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, now I've got another symptom. So now I got to take another medication to deal with that symptom. And then, oh, wait, here's another symptom. Let's suppress that. And then it's just like whack-a-mole with all this crap that you're putting in your system.
Yeah.
And, you know, but nature designed it way better. And so we have to come back to nature. We just have to.
Yeah.
Nature was here before us.
Yeah. We are nature in the most epic form, right? The most wise form, but also potentially the most destructive. But I like to share that I think people are generally amazing, awesome, and they all want the same basic thing. We want to enjoy life, right? Yeah. So it's the awareness of what's possible. You know, this word choice is a misnomer because choice implies that there's an awareness of choice, but most of the time there's not. So now it's a program. So now when we can create a new awareness simply by demonstrating joyful processes that are beneficial to us on every level, then it will be automatically adopted. It will be the idea whose time has come because it'll be just so evident by its existence.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't want to walk out their door, their backyard, pick this, that, the other, versus get in their car, go to a giant store with crappy lighting, and we call these sick buildings, right? And buy like stuff you have to read, like the 100 things on the label. Who doesn't want to just, you know, like it's like, guys, you know, we have to see this for what it is. So, you know, get a taste of this somehow in your life, you know, figure out where you can go to experience this more. I'm excited what you told me on the phone about, because I'm a stories person. I gotta see the demonstration too, because that's what like somehow just gets in there and gets me so excited. Like, okay, someone else did it. Cool. All right. That fuels me even more because I already feel it within me, but now I see this and that and that and that. Okay, cool. So I can do it too. And you said you're going to be doing a show.
There's magic happening. I'm so glad you brought this up, Lydia. I mean, it's literally mind blowing. The mind has have to be gone during this process. So here's what happened. We launched 7 months ago. The producer of The Crocodile Hunter called up and said, Jim, we want to do a show with you. And then about at the same time, and by the way, that was my favorite show for 10 years of my life. So the fact that they called me was already like, oh my God, yes, let's do it immediately. I didn't even, you don't have to think about it when the universe puts it in your lap like this. Then 2 days later, I get a call from my favorite actor 10 years later. Right. And I don't have a lot of favorite actors, like 4 or 5 in my life. Right. And he calls, we just finished a pilot that is going to inspire millions of people to grow food. And that's one thing. I have another Emmy award-winning producer that called me 3, 4, 5 days ago. We're starting another process. I have a documentarian that called me and that's already funded. And that's going to be a documentary on what's going on in the world and what the solutions are. And then an animated thing that I'm meeting with on set. So we got 4 different, very different TV productions by Emmy award-winning and world-known people that are all happening at the same time. How can you explain that in a world of coincidence and it's not logical. It's beyond. There's something going on.
I'm so excited. Yeah. So the reason I'm excited about them, that's amazing. I didn't know about all those. I only heard the one. So I was watching the video you did with Del Bigtree. So you guys can find that on their website, on the foodforestabundance.org website.
.com. Yep. .com.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. foodforestabundance.com. Okay. So go to that website. There's other videos, but that one was probably the featured one. And so I watched the video and I was like, yes, 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 yes. And then at the end, I was like, wait a minute. I want to see it now.
Yeah,
I was like, wait, I want to see them going out and picking stuff. Like, I want to hear, like, what are they doing? Like, how are they using the food? Like, that was me. I was like, I want more of this, because And of course, one day I'll probably do that myself, as document my journey. But
Yeah.
that to me is something I'd rather watch on Netflix or whatever, because it's real life. It's real, like you can't refute it. It's happening. Someone's actually demonstrating that this is possible and it's a way of life. So to me, that's why I got so excited about that. And so it's just really cool to know.
And I do want to share too that what I'm talking about is by no means a new idea. Like this is probably the most ancient idea ever, right? And Bill Mollison and Jeff Lawton, their class, by the way, which is part of our cooperative. We have the cooperative is what is scaling around the world. Our job within our structure is to serve the cooperative, and the cooperative's job is to serve the customer in their area. And how do they serve them? By installing and then supporting their food forest journey, which is, by the way, one of the best business models in the world right now, because we're literally installing freedom. We're creating freedom and health and all these things we talked about. It's like landscaping. It's really it is landscaping. It's just very functional landscaping. So it's a good profit margin, 40% margin. All these neat things are tied into it in a way that now they say if you sell, 4 franchises your first year, you're doing well. We've sold maybe 60 in the last few months, right? And that's what's so neat about this. And our give back, and this is where it gets really fun. Our give back is food forest in public areas. It's inspiring wealthy people. It's inspiring people of these monolithic industries that have been used to control to actually turn that energy into something that's regenerative. The churches, if you know schools or churches or any corporate entity that wants to demonstrate love of life and society and freedom, then get a hold of me, because we've got the exact structure and the team that's in place to help you manifest that.
This is too good.
It's fun. Oh, one more thing that's just mind blowing to me. Our new COO he had $121 billion under his management and was the leader of the largest commercial product in history, first or second. He said it was debatable, but he's our new COO, and we will, by next year, by January, we'll be the first entity that I know of to actually finance the installation of food forests.
So cool.
Yep. So it's all happening in magical ways.
So that's the big scale, and it's blowing up. But for the individual, like you said something a minute ago that made me think, like, well, if people are spending money on landscaping already, like most people are not doing their own landscaping. Let's just be honest. Right. And I mean, I'm from a pretty urban area, and you kind of have to landscape your yard. It's like, it's like the status quo, right? Like you got to get the mower and you got to trim, and otherwise, your neighbors will get annoyed with you or whatever, but if you're already investing in that, but it's just, you're not like benefiting from it other than visually, right? Like this makes so much more sense.
It does. It's more visually beneficial because now you're going to add life, and there's a vibrational reality to it as well. And then of course there's the food.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love what you're doing. So if anyone is inspired by this and ready to take the plunge, and you're not like a total DIYer, because let's be honest, I feel like most of us, it would take so much time to learn all of this ourselves. Because that's the same is true with what I do. It's like I've spent a lot of time learning what I learned. People are like, I'm happy to have you help me figure this out, because I don't have the time or wherewithal to do it. And that's what you're doing for folks in this regard, is putting it all together for them, helping them in the future if they have questions. Like you're not just like, here, see you, bye. Like you're there for the whole journey if they need or want that. So that to me is incredible. Like we need that kind of support in the world right now. We need to know how to do this. We need to know how to get back to this, because we've completely lost touch on how to do this. We used to know, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all the books. We just figured it out along the way. And now, we're just we're stuck in society in the
Right.
hamster wheel. So now we need people to come in and teach us. And so we can relearn and all kind of like turn this into a new way of life, right?
Exactly. To unlearn and to relearn, right? To unlearn the programs, to get the programs out of our heads that are destructive and unsustainable, and to learn by looking at nature and really by enjoying life. Like Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss, follow thy bliss. Truer words have never been spoken. That is so profound. Your emotions are kind of a guide, a compass. So we are about collaboration. We have an unsustainable business model, the way it's currently structured, which people go, what are you talking about? Yeah, we're going to be done in 20 years. There's going to be food going everywhere.
Yeah.
And then we're going to be done. And we want it. It's designed that way. Our business model is designed to change, to evolve. Now, eventually we'll probably be, it'll be all about support, and then it is currently, and it will expand on this idea of shining a light on the producers of our world. The people all around. Nicholas Bertner, whose class we partnered up with, the PDC, is fantastic. And all the permaculturalists around the world, we want to shine a light on you, and we want to help you be more successful and serve more customers. So we have a 2-page contract. I actually had a 330-page contract, and it made me sick. I threw the pile of shit in the trash. It was a franchise document. And every line in that contract represented some type of control or fear. We have no patents, no NDAs, no non-competes. It's all about, let's get food in the ground and let's promote the voluntary exchange of value, which is regenerative capitalism.
Regenerative capitalism. Nice. Yeah, because the way capitalism is going, it's more like not what it originally ever was intended.
Exactly.
Yeah. So are you saying that, okay, so it sounds like you have a lot, like, can you maybe just tell us the different services you offer? Because I feel like you've touched on them, but I'm not clear.
2 primary services. One is we design food forests for people around the world. Just got another awesome one today in Portugal. And then we support the cooperatives who do the installations. So the cooperative is similar to a franchise, other than it's all the BS is thrown away, and it's simply 2 pages about let's exchange value. We will provide all of our assets and marketing support and leads, and you provide the on the ground service.
Got it.
So those are our 2, is the design and the cooperative.
And so the food forest is my yard or so-and-so's yard, like our property. And what would you say to the person who's like, I live in the city, or I live, I don't really have grass?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we have an indoor design team and we have a preparedness consultant. Sean Stanton is our indoor designer. He started in the cannabis industry, and now he's going into indoor food systems, and he's fantastic. And Michael Hoffman does our preparedness blueprint, which, if anybody wants to understand the depth of possibilities with preparedness, not from a scared place, but from a let's be proactive and let's think about thoughtfully what we could have in our home that would benefit us in all sorts of situations. So we do those as well.
That is so cool. So like microgreens, or like plant stands of growing and things like that. Okay.
Love microgreens. Yeah.
Very cool. I've seen, some creative things come out of this last crazy, and people are growing on balconies, like enough food to pretty much, not have to go to the store all the time.
Yeah. With one rack of microgreens that you get at Home Depot, and then the lights and everything and the seeds and the stuff, you'd have to order that from Johnny Seed or Truly for one of those. With one rack, you could have the best salad for your whole family every single day of the week.
Wow. Okay. All right. See, this is great. Yeah. I'm thinking like, we need to be thinking, like you were saying, like, what did you call it, with the way the plants are stacked?
Stacking,
right?
Functionality of a system. Yes.
Okay. So like right now, maybe people might not be able to start a garden here in the north.
Right.
But maybe they could do an indoor thing until the spring, and then go and plan their spring garden.
Exactly. And they can get yeah, their food forest, and they can get a month or two ahead of the cycle there's a lot of different things you can do to speed up time, right? You could do this all on your own by looking at YouTube videos. Great, do it. Or you could work with us or somebody else in your area that does permaculture. And yeah, now's the time, my friends. It's good on every level.
I love it. I love it. So what one thing would you like to leave everyone with as we wrap up?
The one thing is, it's about settling your mind. If you're watching any mainstream mass media, then turn it off and watch something that inspires you. Do something that inspires you. Go outside, be with nature, serve somebody in some way. And then your life is going to change radically. And then really meditation or silencing the mind and being at peace is the foundation of that.
Yep. I agree. I love it. Well, I so appreciate you taking the time to chat with folks. And again, you guys, if you want to learn more about everything Jim talked about today, go to foodforestabundance.com. It's a great website. I've watched all of the videos. I can't wait for more. So check it out. And yeah, guys, get figuring out your next step around how are you going to produce something for your family.
Awesome.
All right, guys.
Thank you, Lydia. All right.
Thanks so much.